What I'm hoping to speak to you about this morning is really to kind of, Gigi kind of alluded to it a little bit in the introduction, but share a little bit about the kind of double life that I've led as someone who's come from an Agile background and also been sort of deeply into Lean Six Sigma and improvement, and just share some of the insights that I've personally shared over the years, but also some of those that we've got within Catalyst working with our clients. Now, as I'm in an academic institution, it's probably worth saying that we've got an understandably biased sample in what I'm going to explain, because it's companies we've worked with. Nonetheless, I'm pretty confident from the conversations I have with people in our line of work that I think you're going to recognize some of the things that I'm talking about. And what I believe is, as we move into this new era, as we can see here, Industry 4.0, and we move into the era of Industry 5.0, I personally think there's an enormous opportunity for the continuous improvement profession in order to help navigate some of the challenges that we're starting to see. So what I would like to do first, just a little bit of fun, but if you could get your mobile phone out and just scan the code. And what I just want to find out is, what kind of tribes do you have in your organization today? And I'll explain what the Marvel characters mean a little bit later. Okay, very good. So, and this is the story that we're seeing as well in this new world. We're seeing a lot of this stuff within organizations, and I'll talk about it a bit later. But the thing that's kind of, I guess, surprising, but it tends to be quite tribal in the way that it's being practiced. We're starting to, although we have these cool things going on in organizations, they almost seem to be separate teams who aren't talking to each other. And I'll talk more about that as we go deeper into the presentation. Okay, so a little bit about me and my kind of, I guess, rather unconventional journey. First thing I should kind of fess up to straight away is that I have a degree in Latin. And I found out that Latin doesn't pay very well. So I kind of started, initially I started trying to make money out of my hobbies. I tried to be a professional musician, and I got pretty close to getting signed at one point, but that didn't work out either. And then I returned to one of my first loves. I'd always been into computer software since I was a small child. Just to show my age, programming my BBC Micro. I know we've got some people from ARM in the room. That's why I'm such a fanboy when I visit Cambridge. And I was so excited when I got this job, because someone was now going to pay me to do my hobby for a living. Can you imagine? Like, what a cool thing. But they had turned my hobby into a nightmare, right? This was it was like really long hours. It was people with like a kind of a rather withered kind of look to them. We were working all hours, God sends, and just not producing very, very good results. We were always late. We weren't producing products that our customers liked. And so the company I was with started doing this stuff called Agile. And I have to be honest, when I first heard about it, I hated the idea of it. It sounded like really ill-disciplined. We were all going to kind of dive in and start coding. And then some really cool things started happening in my life. I started going home at 5 o'clock. I started like enjoying going to work. And really cool things were happening within the business as well. We started shipping software to customers after a few weeks instead of a few years. And we started to be able to get really into getting really deep into the voice of the customer, listening to what our customers wanted us to do next. And inside the company, cool things were happening, like the product managers that used to shout at us were all starting to kind of become our friends. And it was just how I'd imagined doing my hobby for a living would be. So then fast forward, and this was kind of like the early days of Agile. This was the days where we had, for those of you who don't know about the Agile Manifesto, the whole industry basically had a bit of an armistice. And we said, look, we all suck at this. Until someone can do it, right? We're going to join forces. We're going to share ideas. And that philosophy really has endured to this day. And the reason I got the pint is that it was really the idea of we will be meeting up in the pub, just sharing ideas. What's working? Let's do more of it. What's not working? Let's stop. So this was the kind of like, I guess, my introduction to Agile. I then joined an organization that make hardware. So they make coding and marking solutions like best before end dates, barcodes, that kind of stuff. And I helped them because they had a similar kind of story. Software team, very withered and unhappy. And we helped them to turn around the fortunes of the software team. The senior folks heard about me, this weird guy in R&D who'd helped the software people do something cool. And they said, do you want to learn about this stuff called Lean? I don't know, this is kind of like a pattern forming, but I hated it when I first heard about it because they started using this word process, right? Now, I know for this audience, process is not a dirty word, right? We love processes. But I had this idea of processes as a straitjacket, right? Something that was going to... I'd gone out of the Agile, into the Agile age of this new cooler way of doing software, and the thought of going back to bureaucracy and governance and all of that stuff really turned me off. And then luckily the sensei who was teaching me, I'm sure you can all probably tell a similar story. He said, James, you got the wrong idea about process. And I'll really, Buster. Yeah, do enlighten me. And he gave me the whole spiel. He's like, a process, James, is our shared understanding of the current best way. Everybody has two jobs. Follow the shared understanding of the current best way, not because someone you're forced to, excuse you to. What kind of idiot wouldn't follow a known way to get good results? Job number 2, find a better way, right? We all know the story. And so then I was hooked. And it was, for my career, it sent my career in a very interesting direction. I would have been happy in software forever, right? I would never have, it was pure by chance that I got into this stuff. But then I did a whole host of things. I started applying Agile to hardware projects. So this was using Agile, Lean, Six Sigma, all to develop printers and bring down the time to market. I was just joking with Bob because while I was doing that, design of experiments basically saved my career at one point where we had, and it was to do with this kind of Agile philosophy of the small self-organizing team, but the software engineers got together with the chemists, got together with the mechanical engineers, got together with the electronics engineers. Together they were able to create accelerated life testing that enabled us through design of experiments to solve a problem. And as Jiju mentioned earlier, people sometimes ask me to give their kids career advice, and I'm never sure it's such a good idea because I've just kind of done whatever was interesting next. I don't know about the rest of you, but it's whatever sounded fun, I've had a go at it. And it's meant that I've helped an exec team facilitate their Hoshin process. I've been head of program management, so I've actually worked with a billion-dollar company to get lean and agile thinking going together. And what I noticed through this journey was actually there was a lot more that these things had in common than separated them. Even it was really interesting hearing your talk this morning, and Ronald, when you were talking about lean management systems and visual management, when I got into that world, having come from the Agile world, I was like, well, that's what we do, right? We have daily scrums, and we plan using visual stuff, and it was all very, very familiar to me. And what was really familiar was this idea of culture and this idea of leading with humility, being the people, and this, again, I think dovetails what you were talking about this morning, this idea of being people with great questions as leaders, not the people with all the answers. And so, culminating in 2017, and I have to be honest, I've been having the time of my life ever since. I know some of you in the room know Catalyst, but very special company, which I'm now very proud to lead. And what's lovely for Catalyst is we are a bunch of really vocational, passionate people. We are very much at the Gemba kind of people, not necessarily academics, but people are very intellectually curious about things. And when we work with companies, we tend to help them to deliver results, deliver improved cultures. It builds trust. And then what should never happen to a little company like ours, but we end up in the boardroom, right, working with the C-suite, helping them with the big puzzles. And what's fascinating about that, and this is the bit of the story which I want to share, and also, again, understandably biased sample. Do feel free to disagree with me. I'm not saying that this is ubiquitous, but there are some patterns that we've started to spot. And those patterns, I believe, present a massive opportunity for us in continuous improvement. There's lots of cool things going on to deal with what's changed in the world. Things like Industry 4.0, things like the rapid changes that we're seeing with technology. But it tends to be happening, there's lots of crazy going on as well, right? Where we've got almost factions fighting each other as they struggle to deal with the pace of change. And actually, when you squint at it, and again, feel free to disagree with me about this, I think it's all the same stuff. And thank you very much. My goodness, how much did Deming get right all of those years ago, right? Everything is basically plan, do, check, act. This whole thing, we can call it, over on the left-hand side, stuff like lean startup, and getting into new business models and business experimentation. In the middle, we've got things like Scrum and Kanban that can help us to incrementally and iteratively deliver solutions. And there's a wonderful presentation yesterday where they were explaining how they've used that stuff within the oil industry in order to really improve project delivery. And over on the right-hand side, we've got the stuff we know and love. Those muscles that we use to optimize business processes. These repeating things in the business, we can take waste out and we can optimize. And essentially what you've got is kind of, I guess, testing value propositions on the left-hand side, and to the right-hand side, it's about predictability. It's about reducing variation. And what's lovely is when we've been doing this with hardware, there's somewhere in the middle where when you've got past testing the value proposition, would a customer care about this thing? Would they pay for it? As soon as we can, we want to get into building it right. Again, getting back to Deming, making sure not just are we building the right thing, but are we building it right, and building quality into the process. But underneath all of this stuff, we're all systems thinkers. So thank you very much to the work of, say, like Peter Senge. We're starting to really kind of, again, some of those things are timeless, helping us to understand businesses as systems. And blimey, are things moving fast? This was, I think this graph that I'm showing here is probably about 5 years old. And that exponential curve of technology, my goodness, has it taken off. I mean, I remember as a software engineer, I would need to refresh my skill set probably once every 2 or 3 years, right? That was a known thing about being a technologist. That's changed to 2 or 3 months, if not 2 or 3 weeks. If not some weeks, it feels like 2 or 3 days. I am someone who loves technology, and I am struggling to keep up with it. It's incredible how fast things are moving. And once upon a time, things weren't like that. Once upon a time, you had kind of established businesses, and there was a really simple recipe we could follow, couldn't we? We could go and learn about Lean. We could learn about Six Sigma. We could think about our customers. We could learn about flow and waste. As we got fancier, we could get into lean management systems. We could get into Hoshin Kanri. But it was basically rinse and repeat. The world with which we were operating in was fairly stable, fairly predictable. Now we live in what the Agilists call a VUCA world. Put your hand up if you've heard of VUCA. Yeah, loads of people have. That's good. So VUCA, for the uninitiated, really was originally a term from the US military that categorizes the kind of world that we find ourselves in, where we've got volatility, things are changing all the time. We've got uncertainty. Well, actually, we're not quite sure what's going to happen next. We've got complexity, globalization, things are interconnected. We've got complex systems that we're dealing with. And we've got ambiguity. We're not quite sure which way we should go. And it's demanding a different kind of organization, an organization that can think, behave differently in order to meet those challenges. And I really like this work of Humble, Molesky, and O'Reilly, this lean enterprise. Put your hand up if you've read this book, the How High Performance Organizations Innovate at Scale. So what they postulate in this book is that we're seeing the emergence of 2 types of organization. Exploiters, And they are those once upon a time organizations. They still exist. I think the story you were telling us about healthcare this morning, that there are still organizations that are like this, where we can actually work on incremental improvement. We can optimize. It's about really maximizing yield. If we're in a commercial setting, it's about maximizing profitability. But we've got these new radicals that have popped out of nowhere. They're explorers. They're radical. They're not looking to be predictable. In fact, they're looking to disrupt. They're looking to change the game. They're looking for new value propositions, brand new things, and sobering, because we all know how this story ends if we sleep through that kind of transition. We all remember the Kodaks. We all remember what happened to Nokia. We all remember what happened to Toys R Us. We all remember what happened to Blockbuster. Why is it Netflix? Why not Blockbuster online? It's really sobering stories where no matter how efficient your supply chain is, folks, if your competitor comes up with a superior value stream, it doesn't matter how efficient you make your value stream, right? This is the path to slow, if not sometimes certain death, right? An extinction. There's some good news here, though. We're starting to be able to adapt, and we're starting to build organizations that can move at pace and can adapt and can take advantage of all of these cool things that we've been talking about over the last couple of days. The advent of technology is just changing everything. Certainly, what you were talking about, Bob, about machine learning, we were talking about it last night over dinner, but it's just staggering what's happening. The pace at which these things are moving. And some of our old ways of working in organizations is not going to do the trick. It's too slow, and it's not just about optimizing. These technologies can help us optimize, but there are other things going on. But there's some good news here. Culture is everything. I remember when I was younger in my career, and I first started working with C-suite, and I started sharing some of the things I knew. I don't know if you've been in my shoes, but it was almost like they saw me as some kind of cuddly hippie, right? Isn't he lovely? He seems to want to be nice to everyone. He seems to want to give the world a hug. Well, thanks to people like Dan Pink and David Rock, they've started to make the academic work accessible to the business world of what we know from psychology, what we know from neuroscience. And there really is no choice. Those things which Toyota figured out all those years ago are more relevant now than they've ever been. It's about creating these learning organizations, these generative organizations, where we create an environment where people feel psychologically safe, where we can try things out, where we're okay with trying something and it not working, and where really we're kind of, as we would be as lean practitioners, we get tough on process, not on people. This is about creating that kind of nurturing culture. And the other things which we're really seeing is, again, back to Deming, constancy of purpose. Things are moving turbulently around us, but we can still have our raison d'etre. We can still understand why we are today and what do we aspire to be when we grow up. What's the big dream? And some of the techniques which we put your hand up if you've used Hoshin Kanri. Yeah, quite a few. So the Agilist Niktar stuff, I don't know if you know this, but they call it OKRs. It's basically kind of the same thing. They talk about objectives and key results, and they nest experiments in the way that we do. But what we're seeing is this whole thing of systems thinking. What's the big dream? What's in the way? And don't try and command and control your way through this. It was lovely hearing your talk this morning about the tension of top-down versus bottom-up. What we really need to be doing here is understanding where we are, where we're going, and instead of burning platforms, light the fire in people. Create that excitement. What is it we're trying to make happen? And create structures that are able to help us close the gap on where we are now and where we'd like to be. And one of the most powerful tools that I've learned through Agile, so put your hand up if you've used this tool before, Business Model Canvas. Okay, so for those of you who haven't put your hand up, I would highly recommend checking this out. I believe this is one of the most powerful tools in our toolbox. I put it up there with, just to show you how highly I rate it, I put it up there with value stream maps and 5 whys in terms of its significance. It basically, I think this passed me by when I first came across it, because I thought it was just for Silicon Valley startups. I thought it was just for entrepreneurs. And what I found, and it's basically, again, back to the lean idea, basically an A3, right? But it's an A3 that helps you to model a business on a page. And what's lovely about it is it creates simplicity without getting simplistic. So on the right-hand side, we have how do we make money? We've got our value proposition. What value do we provide to our customers? What problem are we solving for them? Do they recognize the problem we're trying to solve? The segments we serve, how we gain customers, our channels, how do we deliver those services, and how do we get paid? And on the left-hand side, we've got basically how we do it. Who do we work with? What are the key processes we do? The key resources that we've got, and what does it cost us? Now, what's lovely about this tool, in case you haven't used it this way, very similar to what we do in value stream mapping, where you do current state, ideal, and future. You can use this as a strategic tool to have conversations with leadership team around the current state of your business, the big dream, and then use it as a storytelling tool to describe what changes are required around here in order to get from where we are now to the big dream. And you can distill it down into objectives and key results. And for those of you, I noticed earlier on one of the slides we had the Kaplan and Norton balanced scorecard. In case you haven't figured it out yet, if you flip this thing upside down, we've got learning and growth, we've got processes, we've got customer, and we've got our financials. It enables us to kind of really understand the wiring of what's going on. And it also enables us, from an agility perspective, to start understanding the difference between what do we believe to be true, our assumptions, and what do we know is true. And it enables us to get into a much more generative, exploratory mode of thinking when it comes to the things we believe. You know, I believe if we did this for our customers, it would result in something happening. I believe if we reduced the cycle time by this much, it would start to create competitive advantage. Because we were quicker, we'd start to acquire new customers. We'll know we're right when, what's the simplest experiment that would test that idea before we start betting the house? And what's lovely is it starts to transition us from hippo decisions. By the way, put your hand up if you know what a hippo is. For the uninitiated, the highest paid person's opinion, right? It's really important to avoid hippo decisions. The hippos, sometimes if you're lucky, you know, if you have someone like Steve Jobs, it might be okay to listen to the hippos. But, my goodness, you can make some mistakes if their assumptions are wrong, because they're incredibly persuasive. And these tools enable us to start having those. And by the way, notice the link on why I think there's an opportunity for the continuous improvement community. We're talking about being empirical. We're talking about running business experiments, all the stuff we've done all over the years, but plan, do, check, act loops that test business strategy, that test assumptions, that test rationale. And, you know, back to the famous quote, you know, without data, you're just somebody with an opinion. Let's get like that about our business strategy. And it's about starting to relieve the business of some of the shackles so that we're able to, like we would as a smaller organization, test our ideas out. There was one organization that I was working with who are, you have to be, again, similar NDA problem to what you had before, right? But it's, let's just say it's a company that does cosmetics. And they had this idea that their competitors had somehow become much better at understanding the customer than they were. And I couldn't believe that they'd missed something vital, right? What they'd missed was they couldn't see all of the failed experiments, right? They couldn't see any of the null results. They were just seeing the successful companies that had come through the net. And they had enormous resources. They had enormous resources to start testing the ideas. And without going in too deep into it, what they'd managed to do was they had kind of like a focus group, which was all around more checking that the cosmetics don't do harm than they were to do getting the voice of the customer back. What they started to do was actually asking these trialists, what do you think of this stuff? You know you've got it right when they don't want the trial to end, when they start trying to get their mates on the focus group so that they can try out your product. Then you know that you're along the right lines, you're starting to move in the right direction. And this business model canvas starts to provoke that kind of thinking, starts to get us really honest about assumptions and beliefs versus cast iron proofs. And this is mega important because this, sorry, it's not coming out very well on the screen, but at the top here it says outcomes, and down here it says decisions. And if we go back to the Kaplan and Norton balanced scorecard, too many organizations, when we start the conversation, everyone's obsessed up here. They're using the KPIs that the shareholders use, the financial measures to make decisions. Well, guess where that leads? That leads to a strategy of we need to cut cost, which leads to slow and painful death, right? This is not how to satisfy your customers. And it's back to everything that we've known from Lean. It's about understanding your customer, but really, really getting into this voice of the customer, using short interval controls in order to get the feedback loop and check that we're along the right lines. And once you've started to distill that down, what you find is a lot of the tools we know still help. Value stream mapping, absolutely incredible tool. It's blown my mind how useful this has been as a strategic tool in this era of Industry 4.0. Where we're using now, even within transactional processes, we're using things like robotic process automation. You mentioned Python scripts, right? We're starting to be able to connect data together in a way we've never done before. Even within Microsoft Office now, we've got incredible automation tools that can help us to link systems. We've got artificial intelligence, which can write code for us. We've got the advent of kind of digital technologies where, again, going back, even if you just look inside of our Office 365 now, you can write Power Apps. You don't even need to be able to code to start doing some semblance of digital transformation. And the weapons of war we've got now within this looking at delivering value to a customer is amazing. Sometimes this is beyond Kaizen. This is what replaces it. The value stream is almost unrecognizable from what was there before. But nonetheless, the same ideas, the same idea of current state, ideal state, future state. What are the next most important things that we need to do? And things like the theory of constraints, super important. Even if we're building a new business idea, where's the constraint? At the beginning, it might be to do with the demand, getting people to understand this new idea. As things start to move, it becomes our ability to deliver our supply chains. And think good old Tim Woods and taking waste out, still so, so valuable. And is Wombat, if you haven't come across Waste of Money, Brains and Time. But, there is a but. Not all of the problems are the ones we know and love. So put your hand up if you've come across this before, the Cynefin framework by David Snowden. So this is a gift for today. Definitely go and check this stuff out. This one of the most powerful tools to help us navigate this new Industry 4.0 era. On the right-hand side, you can kind of follow your way anti-clockwise. Simple problems, they're ones where it's a known problem, there's a known solution, there's an app for that. If I see a load of mess everywhere and everyone's looking for something, I apply. It's a mess everywhere. There's an app for that in Lean. What do we do? 5S, absolutely right. I don't need to do root cause analysis. I just need to go and apply the recipe. Everyone with me so far? Then other kind of problems. They get more tricky, don't they? The ones where we need someone like Bob to help us. We need to get some experts together. We need to get down to the root cause. We need to get things like DMAIC. This is more like our complicated systems, right? These are systems where we still got a bound system. For those of you into your y is equal to a function of x, we've got a set of outputs. We've got inputs. We've got things that go on in our process. But we can be pretty confident if we go and make a change to an x, we're going to make a change to the y. But I'm talking at the Lean Six Sigma conference. Of course, you all know this stuff. But over in the top left, we've got a whole bunch of other problems. Complex adaptive. This is where we've got a system where we've got a load of interconnected parts. I'm launching a new product. I don't know what's going to happen. We launch a new training course in Catalyst. Does anybody want to come on the course? Are they prepared to pay for it? Do they start telling their mates? If we bring a course, does a competitor then come and then start to follow us into the market? And what happens? And this is all about an interconnected ecosystem. If you've ever tried to use Lean Six Sigma to solve this kind of problem, what happens? Anyone tried? Total analysis paralysis, right? You'll just be stuck forever trying to understand what's going on. What we need to do in this sense is probe, sense, and respond. Probe, for those of you into complexity theory, means make a small change to the system, study and see what happens, apply amplifiers to effects on the system that you like, apply dampeners to things that you don't. And it's a different type of problem solving. And over on the chaos is basically things like we had in the pandemic, where there's an emergency, right? There isn't, like yesterday, when the fire alarm went off, there was no time to think, right? We all left. We didn't start to do, why is the fire alarm sounding? We just had to follow the recipe and get the hell out. Now, I'm about to do a bit of a crime, because I'm going to give you a very, very simple generalization. But essentially, over on the right-hand side, that's where we're using Lean and Six Sigma. On the left-hand side, that's when we're using things like agility. But being able to diagnose what you're dealing with, mega important. It's very unlikely, or it's becoming increasingly unlikely, that when you're trying to help the C-suite solve one of these problems, that things are going to package themselves nicely into these nice, oh, we'll give this to the Lean Six Sigma team anymore, right? This is all about often looking at the context of not just the value stream, not just Y is equal to a function of X, but the outcomes. What changes in customer behavior do we see when we start to make these changes? And this is probably the thing which I see the most. We are not alone. There are other systems thinkers in these businesses doing this stuff. And what's curious is we're starting to see that they're kind of stuck in their own comic book. So you have the Hulk. The Hulk's into design thinking. The Hulk likes empathizing with customers, likes coming up with ideas, likes doing quite revolutionary stuff, very incremental and iterative, and very cool stuff if you haven't done it before. Personally think there should be more of a cross-pollination here, whatever happens in things like Define, to use some of the design thinking techniques and get more down and dirty with our customers. We've got Lean Six Sigma, Thor. Thor's kind of also stuck in many organizations in their own comic book. They just get asked to do stuff sadly, when we want costs to go down. Now, I'm looking around the room at your body language to see what kind of organizations you're working with. Some of you are going, no, not us. But others are going, yeah, that's us. We're all about FTEs. We're all about trying to improve our margin. And over here, then we've got these digital folks. I don't know if you've met them. They're kind of stuck. This is Iron Man. And Iron Man's kind of stuck in IT very often, doing really cool things. Really cool things. And the Scrum and the Kanban folks, they're doing a lot of what we know how to do, right? They put your hand up if you've heard of DevOps. So DevOps, if you've got software folks in your organization and they're using DevOps, it stands for development and operations all as one team. So it's like back to a little bit like what we'd know in Lean with U cells. And it's the idea that a single team can make a change and put it into production with perfect quality, usually several times a day. So it's this, ultra poker yoke, right? This is building quality into the process. Deming will be so proud. This is making bulletproof changes that can go into production, where we build quality into the process. We have a poker yoke, and we can reliably make changes to the system almost in real time. Why did they do it? Not because they were really into Deming. They got into it because they needed feedback from customers. The whole idea of agility is to have short-range, short-interval controls on customer feedback. So as we're making changes, we can start to understand, are we making the right changes? What should we do next? Really important if you're into portfolio management, we can stop bad ideas really early. As a portfolio manager, never bothered me at all if we were on the wrong track. If we figured out, by the way, we used to have, at my last company, we used to have funeral parties for bad ideas that we decided to stop doing. And the whole thing was to start getting starting to celebrate learning, even if it was disappointing learning. And I never minded if we stopped a project, we pivoted a project. I did mind if you'd already spent a suitcase of cash and you hadn't told us, you knew we were on the wrong path. This is what the Agile folks are getting good at. They're getting good at organizational learning, at testing ideas out. And what we're finding is these techniques are not all about software. We're seeing the rise of business agility. These are things that we can apply in a wide setting. There was someone came on our business agility course who was an operational excellence manager. And he was sort of saying, yeah, this is an interesting course, James. But what does it have to do with me? And I thought, I'll take that challenge. I'll spend pro bono, but I'll take that challenge. We'll do a little workshop. We'll have a look. And I looked at the business model canvas, and he started telling me what he was doing. He said, I've been asked to speed up this value stream and take some of the cost out. Okay, why is that? What are you trying to do? Oh, we've heard that the competition are quicker than us. And there's a theory that if we were quicker, we're also, by the way, he then explained, leaking customers to the competition, right? Our retention's poor and we're leaking customers. And as we dug into it, I was like, well, okay, there you are right there. There's a business assumption. You believe that if the process sped up, that you would start to get more. Well, where's your evidence for that? And then straight away we were into, actually, could we run a business experiment to test that out? As it turned out, I think it would have been a good thing to do anyway. I'm not trying to call it out as an example, but just showing the power of this thinking has gone way beyond software. It's a bit like what happened with Lean all those years ago. You know how it started out in the factory, and then we started on business processes, and then it's become now ubiquitous in the way that we would look at process improvement. Similar thing now is happening with Agile. This Agile thinking. But still in many organizations, Iron Man unfortunately is stuck. And Captain America, quality management. This is a really interesting one. I'm not saying this is out everywhere, but my goodness, do we see some crazy, where the continuous improvement team and the quality team are two separate departments. Put your hand up if that's true where you are. Bit crazy, eh? How on earth could that be? If there's a tribe who are so passionate about quality that you'd want them as part of the quality management organization, it's got to be the Lean folks. But somehow we see them in separate tribes. And finally, the new kids on the block. I've kind of bundled them together, but we could have probably spread these out. Things like AI, process mining, big data, analytics, the machine learning stuff you were talking about, Bob, total game changer. But again, seems to, in some organizations, have become a department all on its own. Except this is nuts, because now you're expecting the C-suite to figure out what kind of puzzle that we're dealing with. Well, that's not what these folks do. They're not systems thinkers. And what they do is they give it to one of the tribes that they think will be best to give it to. And then it gets trapped. And we know the old saying, don't we? To a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. And sure as hell, if you give it to the RPA folks, they will RPA the hell out of it. If you give it to the Lean folks, they'll Kaizen the hell out of it. If you give it to the Agile folks, they'll start doing business experiments. The answer's not one of these things, it's all of them in many, many cases. And it's bringing the thinking together. And hence what the title of the talk. It's all about bringing the Avengers together, right? Bringing these superheroes. And what we think in Catalyst is what we're seeing is the rise of a new kind of superhero. Someone who can actually help navigate the crazy, who can work with executive teams to understand the big dream, to understand the business system, to understand the difference between beliefs, assumptions, and facts, and can help to diagnose what we're dealing with so that we can basically build organizations suitable for the era that we are in and that we're moving towards, where the pace of change is such that we really need some interplay between these systems thinkers. And my pitch, and the best I've been able to figure out, and by the way, I'm not particularly into labeling things, but business agility seems to be the term that's describing what I'm talking to you about today. It's this idea of an organization that is not fixed in optimize, that's able to become somehow ambidextrous, be exploiters and explorers. Don't be one thing or the other. There's a famous Jeff Bezos video where he talks about this, where he talks about day one in Amazon, and he's asked what's day two for Amazon, and he said, it's slow and painful death. And he said, that's why every day is day one in Amazon. They're constantly looking to innovate, but equally, they're very into Lean and Lean Six Sigma and optimizing. And it's about, for many organizations, it's about becoming ambidextrous. And business agility seems to be the glue that helps us to bring these different systems thinking tribes together. And what does it mean? Well, it probably means a lot of the things we build for Lean Six Sigma anyway. It's why I think the opportunity for this community is enormous. Because if you look at the corporate rebel stuff, put your hand up if you've heard of the corporate rebels. Okay, I recommend checking that stuff out. There are two Dutch guys who got really, really fed up with corporate life, and so they set themselves up as bloggers. And they just went around visiting interesting companies that were doing interesting things, but not just interesting things, things which were resulting in business success. And they started to figure out some patterns from the organizations that they'd studied. That we moved from profit to purpose and values, that we moved from a hierarchy to a pyramid to a network of teams. We move from directive leadership to supportive. It becomes about align and enable now, not command and control. That we move from plan and predict. And by the way, humans are nuts if you haven't figured this out already. We prize, due to evolution, predictability above all things. We like to see things like, how on time are we? Well, actually, in a world that's moving as fast as this, do we care about predictability anymore? We care about effective and we care about efficient. Being predictable, not so much, but humans crave predictability. And it's why some of the techniques we learn from business agility are so powerful, because short interval controls give you that predictability in a sensible way. And what we can do is, and this is where we can really help as CI practitioners, we can get the business measuring the right things. It's not about on time anymore and measuring scope. It's about looking at the outcome-based measures to see, does the work matter? Are we working on the right things? And we've got rules and controls to freedom and trust, centralized authority to distributed, secrecy to radical transparency, job descriptions to talents and mastery. I bet most of you are looking at that, though, thinking, I recognize that stuff, right? That's kind of what we've been doing for years in Lean Enterprise. This is not new stuff. And what we're seeing, thanks to the work of John Carter, he talks about the need within organizations for a dual operating system, that we still need to be good at running businesses. We still need what you or I would call a lean management system to run the business. But what we also need are these small self-organizing teams that can work as entrepreneurs within our organization, who can take pieces of the puzzle and go and figure out the right techniques. And so my challenge today is, do you want to become an Avenger? This is all about widening your skill stack. This is about becoming what we call T-shaped. I-shaped is your specialism. And for many of us, we went yellow, green, black, master black. I don't know what comes after master black belt, right? But getting deeper and deeper into Minitab and all of these things, what's happening now is the breadth of our skills is becoming more important to navigate this Industry 4.0 space. It's about being able to think systemically still and help make good decisions, help apply business agility where we need to. It's definitely about purpose and meaning. One of the key things we do in Catalyst when we first start working with the C-suite is start asking, what's the big dream around here? What are we trying to make happen? And very often, once you've got that, back to Deming's constancy of purpose, we're then in a conversation of what's in the way. How do we close the gap? from where we are now to the big dream. What would we need to change? And we can then start to get our volunteer army helping us solve the puzzle. And it's really about outcome over outputs, measuring changes in customer behavior, not necessarily being so obsessed anymore about y is equal to a function of x, but what's the big why behind it? What's the commercial measure? What's the commercial needle that we're trying to change? And examine options, help organizations make good decisions. So if you like what you've heard today, come and see us at the stand. Very small plug, but if you are interested, we've got training and business agility if you want to come and talk to us about that. And we've also, in recognition of this new T-shape, we've also, in partnership with the British Quality Foundation, launched the Business Black Belt, which is basically an Avenger. It's broadening the skill set. You'd still, by the way, don't panic. You still get to play with Minitab, right? We're not doing away with it, but it's providing this breadth of skill set. So, in terms of what I had to say, that's it for the presentation. But I think there's probably a couple of minutes, is there, for a few questions? Okay. Any questions?